It is a joy to be with you this morning. And maybe a preliminary note, since we broadcast and people pick it up in various parts of the country, sometimes there's a little digital glitch. If you're picking this up at home and something goes wrong, sometimes a particular microphone doesn't work, you can text or call Rebecca Vaughn, who's this morning doing the tech support up there. And it doesn't help to call me when I'm preaching. I got my phone off. I wouldn't be able to answer it anyhow. And even if I answered, I wouldn't know what the deal is to it. And so we're just delighted to be together and serve God. And if you have a computer problem, we got Lane Anaguchi. Actually, he's a 911 computer guy. He'll come out to your house any time of the day or night. Well, no, that's not right. But Lane, you really helped us, and thanks so much. Jeff said in his devotional, he said, would you rather be someplace else this morning? And for me, the answer is no. This is really where I wanted to be. In fact, one of my problems is I so much like being together and what I do. For 50 years, Glenda has said, please do not bring your computer on vacation. And so I like to stay in touch and involved, and it's a joy to have you here this morning. This morning's lesson was actually requested by a member here, and I thought, dealing with anger, hardly anybody really needs that, only about 96% of us, and so forth. And so as I think about that, I thought, well, how many times does it come up in the Bible? It gives you thought about how important it is with mankind. The word anger itself, New American Standard Version at least, comes up 272 times, almost 300 times by itself. And then angry and wrath and fury and furious and rage and such, almost 600 times in the Bible. That's a big deal. And the first time it comes up is Genesis chapter 4 and verse 5. And Cain became angry with his brother. I mean, in the very beginning, that was an issue. And so we get to think about some of the wramifications and what's God's solution to this. One of the interesting things I came across years ago that anger actually is a natural emotion. God himself expresses anger. But the reality is, for us humans at least, it's a secondary emotion. The underlying, the trigger, is a feeling of either fear, pain, or frustration in some area or application. It might be, pain might be physical, it might be emotional. And it's not the pain alone. It's the meaning we attach to that pain. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, if, let's just say, you're in a coffee shop and you're tired and it's the end of the day and you're worn out and you had to wait in a long line, get your cup of coffee and it's on a tray and somebody brushes behind you and bumps into you, your coffee spills, it's all over the floor, it's on your clothes, and after waiting 20 minutes to get the cup of coffee. So what's your mind is, what in the world? But what if, as you turn around to look at this person that was clunk enough to bump into you, spill your coffee and all the rest, this is the friend you have been missing for 10 years. And you just happen to literally bump into each other. And they really apologize. I am so sorry. Hey, let me buy you coffee. No, and what do we say? That's all right, I'll buy yours. I want you to think about what happens there. It is the same coffee shop, the same coffee, the same amount of time. And you're angry in one and rejoicing the other. Nothing has changed except the attitude you have toward the person that you bumped into. Our anger really attaches to things by some meaning that we tie it to. Triggers can be physical issues. It might be tiredness. It might be hormonal imbalance. It could, for some, brain injury makes people prone to be more irritable. We could be on one day or another more cranky or upset or angry. It might be emotional issues of past abuse, something that brought thoughts of rejection or betrayal or fear or frustration to our mind in a particular setting. It could be social issues, a stressful workplace, abusive spouse or parents, or a knowledge of some unpunished crime or governmental corruption or tragic injustice or personal issues, selfishness or lack of compassion or accountability. Sometimes people blow up and, man, it's just volcanic. And, popular psychology says, well, just express it. Get it out there. If you're mad, take your pillow and just start punching it. You'll feel better. Well, maybe so. But that's not the way you solve those kind of problems. A long time ago, a lady said to Billy Sunday, who was a baseball player and an exceedingly popular preacher. And the lady said, there's nothing wrong with me losing my temper. I blow up and it's all over. And Billy Sunday said, so does a shotgun. And look at the damage it leaves behind. And so you get to think about, it's not just us, but how does that affect people around us? And so I thought, well, let's talk about some of the pieces of this puzzle. And the first thing is, and it sounds like it's counterintuitive. Anger is created by our thoughts. It's somehow we look at something or the issue or the person or the event. Think about Proverbs 23 and in verse 7. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. It doesn't matter if they're smiling. Sometimes you see it, the face is smiling and the eyes are just, man, they're burning. The smile doesn't go beyond the cheeks. And so what kind of person are they really? What are you thinking about? I came across this, and I don't know how long ago, it must be 30 years ago, in a book, Feeling Good, The New Mood Therapy. And I thought, this has got to be wrong. And what he says is, no one can make you angry. You make yourself angry by the interpretation you put on a situation. Yeah. That's nutty. And they said, and the author of the book said, now if you feel like kicking this book into a corner, he said, I challenge you, read on. Because I thought, no, because this situation makes me mad. And what he's saying is, no, the situation didn't make you mad. You have a particular emotional response to it because of the meaning that you are placing on it. I thought, Here's some neat insight. He said, becoming angry creates a feeling of righteousness and power and morals. I didn't do that. Look at what they did. And I didn't do that. And this is what they did to me. And so we have our own internal dialogue going on. He said, when you're angry with cause. Oh, yeah, I'm angry. And that's because blah, 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 blah. The people who have hurt you are wrong, and they should admit it and pay. Ooh, that's pretty. Somehow or another, by apologizing, by being exposed to everybody, by going to jail, by being fined, by having to do community, something they need to have imposed upon them. We feel, when we're angry, we're in the right. Or I wouldn't be angry, right? Well, maybe we're not in the right. Angry people usually feel their anger is justified, even if others don't agree. If you watch some of the TV programs in the past, like Judge Judy, the person's absolutely wrong. Everybody in the courtroom says they're wrong. The judge says they're wrong. The other person says they're wrong. They're interviewed on the way up. I don't believe any of that. That wasn't fair. And there's no changing their mind about that. Think about it in Luke chapter 15. You had the prodigal son. He went off and just made a wreck out of his life. He came back, and wanted to reconcile with his father, and father ran to him and kissed him and throws a party for him. And what does the older brother want to do? He's not going into that party. And the father comes out, and what's the deal? He said, not my brother, this son of yours. He took the money and ran off with it and spent it with prostitutes. And he comes back, and you are throwing a party. I have never had a party with my friends. Not one time. And this is what you did for him. And the father says, all that I have is yours. This is your brother who was dead and is now alive. We should rejoice and make merry. Point of view that you've not been injured, older brother. You're going to be blessed. Blessed beyond. You don't have the regrets. You have the abundance of all the Father's wealth. Change of mind. Change in point of view. How about Jonah? You're familiar with the story. God wanted him to go preach to Nineveh, the traditional enemy of the Israelites and everybody else around them. And so Jonah decided, I'm not doing that, man. I'm going the opposite direction. I'm getting on a boat. I'm going to Tarshish, apparently in Spain. And you asked me to go east, I'm going west. I'm out of here. God said, maybe not. So he ends up being thrown overboard, swallowed, and large marine animal pukes him up on the shore again. You are going where I tell you to go. And so he goes about the city, and he preaches that you shape up or you are going to be destroyed. And guess what? At least for a time, they actually shape up. Well, that's wonderful. Unless you happen to be Jonah, who wanted them to pay the price and have the penalty. And so in Jonah chapter 4, and in verses 1 through 4, maybe even backing up into the last verse of chapter 3, where when God saw their deeds and that they turned from their wicked way, and God relented concerning the calamity he had declared he would bring on them, and he did not do it. Chapter 4 and verse 1. And it greatly displeased Jonah, and he became angry, and he prayed to the Lord and said, please, Lord, was this not what I said while I was still in my own country? That's the problem, God. They're rotten people, and they ought to be nuked. And so he is beside himself. And he said, to forestall this, I fled to Tarshish. For I knew you're a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abundant in loving kindness, and one who relents concerning calamity. Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for death is better than life. Ooh. And the Lord said, do you have good reason to be angry? Don't tell me if I got good reason or not. Verse 5, and then Jonah went out from the city and sat on the east of it, and he made a shelter for himself, and he sat in the shade until he could see what would happen to the cities. Maybe God will get him after all, and good. And so the Lord appointed a plant, and it grew up over Jonah to be a shade over his head, and to deliver him from discomfort. And Jonah was extremely happy about the plant. But God appointed a worm that when dawn came the next day, it attacked the plant, and it withered. And when the sun came up, and God appointed a scorching east wind, and the sun beat down on Jonah's head, so he became faint and begged with all his soul to die, saying, death is better than life. And God said to Jonah, do you have good reason to be angry about the plant? And he said, I have good reason to be angry, even to death. And the Lord said, you had compassion on the plant for which you did not work, and which you did not cause to grow, which came up overnight and perished overnight. Should I not have compassion on Nineveh, the great city, which has more than 120,000 persons who do not know the difference between the right and left hand? Little kids, as well as many animals. Point of view. So Jonah saw his own selfish needs, desires, and attitude. God says, Welcome to the world. There's more than your narrow point of view on the way you think the universe ought to be run. And so we get to think about, here's Jonah. His anger was created by the thoughts and the interpretation he put on events. How about us as well? There's a number of fairy tales, and I just say other myths about anger. And sometimes we just assume them to be true, or maybe a parental figure mentioned them. But in 1 Thessalonians 5:21, Paul says to examine all things carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. Is whatever we were taught, is this true? Is this biblical? Or is it's just fluff that I've been carrying around in my head? And some of these maybe you've thought about, others no. Well, what if someone would say, we have no right to become angry at others? Well, God was. 1 Kings 11, verse 9, God was angry with Solomon and with Israel and with a number of other things. Well, anger shows we're strong. Well, maybe not. Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 9, he says, anger rests in the bosom of fools. Person, I'm angry all the time. In fact, yesterday I was talking to Glenda about this. I said, Glenda, when you think of an angry person, who comes to your mind? And she said the name of somebody we knew 40 years ago. And I said, that's the exact person that comes to my mind. And that man virtually never, almost never smiled. Everything is bad and is crummy, and the job and the attitude and the other people and the family and the dog. Nothing was ever really positive and happy and such as that for this person for any length of time. Anyone who's angry is a bad person. Well, being angry isn't inherently a sin, depending on what you do with it, right? Ephesians chapter 4 and down in verse 26 in the first little part, and we'll come back to this. He says, be angry and do not sin. So you can be, and there's levels, right? From mild irritation, to, man, I'm fried. Oh, man, I'm blistered, or whatever it happens to be. Now, what are you going to do about that? Here's that. You should never go to bed angry. Well, the Bible doesn't actually say you should never go to bed angry. What it does say is don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Now, the interesting part, that word angry is a little different word in the second half of the verse, and Strong says it means rage. Oh, yeah, well, if you are to that level, solve it right away. I'll finish it when I want to finish. Oh, my goodness. Well, I guess maybe you ought to think about finishing it immediately. Love means you'd never get angry at me. I like that. But Solomon said there's a time for every purpose under heaven. Well, maybe you do cause somebody to be agitated with you. A parent should never get angry with his child. Well, David was angry with Amnon. 2 Samuel 13:21. Loving spouses don't get angry. Are you kidding? Jacob was angry with Rachel. Hey, give me a baby. I'm doing my part. I'm not God. I don't determine how your body works. And so what we need to think about is, what would God have us do? What would God have us to think? How would God have us to react? And what we're going to be dealing with is a heart transplant, not anger management. It's not just here's a 6 little tricks to work on and blah, blah, blah. We're talking about changing the inside of us. In Hebrews chapter 13 and down verse 15, he said, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your heart. That's why I like this graphic. It shows kind of this stony work has kind of grown around that heart. And people say, man, nobody's telling me anything. Well, apparently so. That's not going to have a good ending, but I hear what you're saying. We have to be willing to have that tender heart, say, God, I don't do it all right. And what would you have me to understand? What could I do better? I appreciate the tax collector in Luke 18 down in verse 13. He's in the temple and Jesus portrays him as saying, God, be merciful to me, the sinner. God, if you could just fix all those people out there. He said, that's not the issue. I mean, they may have their own issue. But Mr. Tax Collector, it's you. And let's see about you getting you right with God. And so once we start approaching our anger issues or the problems with people or family or government or the strangers, God, I want to start with me. Be merciful to me, the sinner. Psalm 37, verse 8. Cease from anger, for note those two words repeatedly come up in the same verse. He's not strictly just repeating himself. Those are two different words, and we'll talk about them in just a little bit. And he said, forsake wrath and do not fret. Yeah, but what if they do this and then that'll happen? And then what we're doing is we're already mind reading and we're fortune telling. Paul, what if you just had a better attitude? What if you just relax? And probably half of you anyhow know Rocky Wells, who was with us, and tremendous person, was one of our elders, and health issues and such. It really was much better for him to move to Texas, be near family. But anyway, the calmest person I ever knew. Absolutely a joy. And those of you that were at West Campus know his story. The story is about the time when Rocky Wells got mad. You see, the time? Yep, there was one time. His kids are all grown up and they have kids, but this is when Rocky was a young parent. And here's the boys, and they're in the back seat causing a ruckus or whatever the thing was. He got home and he was angry and got out of the car and slammed the door. You say, and? Oh, and nothing. That's the end of the story. I mean, he slammed the door. That's the family story of the time Rocky got angry. Well, and I would tell Rocky over and over, I said, Rocky, you're such a good example for me. In fact, I asked Glenda last night. I said, Glenda, am I a calm person? She's sitting over there. I said, Glenda, I'm saying that versus am I an angry person? She said, oh, no, you're not an angry person. She said, intense. Man, I'm intense when I eat cereal. But Rocky had that beautiful attitude. Just what a joy. And I said, Rocky, I want to be more like you. He said, I actually need to be more like you. So there's a balance in life, isn't there? In Romans chapter 12 and verse 2, he said, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So that's what we're talking about. It's not just, I want to learn some tricks. I want to change. Ephesians 4:31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor be put away from you. That bitterness, I hold on to this, and man, it fries me when I think about it in the past. And wrath and anger, two different words we'll notice in just a moment. And clamor, yelling. He says, quit it. Well, that's just who I am. He said, I understand. Let's do a heart transplant and make you the way God wants you to be. Ezekiel 36:26, he said, I'll give you a new heart and a new spirit. Okay, God, I'm ready to hear it. Let's talk about that. Well, there's some good reasons for it. I'm just going to move through these quickly. Why should I want to change? Well, think about it. It's really an issue of strength. In Proverbs 16:32, he who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures the city. Wow. Colin Powell, wow, military guy. He said, you control your spirit. You're more powerful. I mean, just showing I'm angry doesn't make me strong. Oh, no, it says some other things sometimes. But strength isn't inherently one of them. And honor, in Proverbs 19 and verse 11, a man's discretion makes him slow to anger, and it is his glory to overlook a transgression. Just isn't that big. Yeah, they said this about you. What do I care? It's not a big deal. And there's reward. There's consequences in all of life. Proverbs 19:19, a man of great anger shall bear the penalty. They make decisions, and there's consequences because of their actions. And if you rescue him, you only have to do it again. The thing is, I'm just not trying a shell game, but I want to change. I want to be what God wants me to be. And there's wisdom with that. Proverbs 22:24. Do not associate with a man given to anger or with a hot-tempered man, lest you learn his ways and find a snare for yourself. We tend to be like the people we associate with. Proverbs 13 and verse 20, walk with the wise, and you'll be wise. Choose your friends. There's consequences. You get blessed with wisdom for having that calm spirit. And there's different kinds of anger that I've alluded to. For instance, the word wrath, and various translations will use what word seems best to them. But the Greek word here is thumos, which we get our word thermal or thermos bottle from. And one example of it is in Acts 19 and 28. Here was this mob that was yelling for 2 hours. Hey, great Diana! Whoa. Trench says it's a more boiling agitation. It rises quickly and subsides quickly. Town clerk comes on and says, settle down, shut up, what are you doing? Man, we're going to be called to account. You got a problem with the guy? Take him to court. They go, oh, yeah, that's good. Okay, go home. They go home. So you've seen that here's some people, it's a blow up. Boom. And yeah, I didn't know. And, oh, yeah, but bam, there's another one. In Nazareth synagogue, when Jesus was reading scripture and said, today has this scripture been fulfilled in your presence. You're claiming to be the fulfillment of the Messiah? Let's throw him off the cliff. Let's just kill him. My word. That word for anger is a work of the flesh, not of the spirit. And God says, I want you to put it away, along with the yelling. Some people say, oh, we just yell in our family. Yeah, don't. Yeah, but we're all Hungarians, we're all Italians, or whatever. God says, no. That's the family I grew up in. I determined we're not doing that in the family which I established, and we don't. You get angry with each other, but you say it in words. That irritates me. There's another word that often is translated anger, and the Greek word is orge. Trench says, synonym of New Testament word, says it's more internal and abiding. It's a settled habit of mind, often with a view of revenge. I don't blow up. I just get even. All right, what I'm going to do is I'll never. And so it's that more churning internal thing. Think about this in Ephesians 4:26a. Be angry and do not sin. He said, man, it's really got you churning, but don't do the wrong thing just because you feel that way. In Ephesians 4:31b, the second half, he said, and let this be put away. Ah, look at that. He wants me to relieve myself of the churning and the holding in the bitterness and the sense of, man, I get my chance, I'm going to show. And it's used for boats when they're sailing away. We're in a port city in Tacoma. You have freighters from all over the world. When a ship leaves the dock, what do you do about it? You say, what do I do? I don't do anything about it. I just let it go. He said, that's what you do. You just let it go. I'm not going to hang on because I used to do that in my home, or that's how I was trained up. And the last word sometimes is translated rage. Really, it just occurs one time in the New Testament, and it's par orgismos. And Strong says that's what it is. And so when he says, do not let the sun go down on your rage, he said, solve that. Man, that's horrendous. Fix it quick. So, okay, there's different things, and what God says is I want you to have a more peaceful life and interaction with others. And so the heart of this is this particular slide. So how do I deal with things God's way? And the first thing is you start out, yeah, I need to fix Paul Mitchell in the back row. Why don't you fix the Paul Hawthorne in the front row? That's where we start out with the thing. 1 Corinthians 11:28, let a man examine himself. Well, they do. And when you do it honestly, is there failing on your part? Yeah, well, if he just had them, yeah, but what did you do? Well, it wasn't as big a deal. It was to him. Saul chased David for 20 years. He's out in the wilderness, and Saul, a little beautiful little valley, and there's an oasis at the end of it. And David could have killed him. And Saul realizes that, and David didn't. And Saul says, and he wept And he said, you are more righteous than I. He always said, but David, you're the problem. Saul just realized, maybe Saul's the problem. So you start there. Maybe it's me. And that little graphic there, here the guy that got a log in his eye. Hey, bub, you have a little something in your eye there. I think there's a piece of sawdust. Let me get it out. Well, I got a 2x4 stuck in mine. Maybe it'll go a lot better if I start with me. And then think about praying for forgiveness. I like Psalm chapter 19, verses 12 and 13. The psalmist says, forgive me of hidden faults and keep, and it says, thy servant back. I want to save space. Just keep me from willful sins. So God, I'm asking for forgiveness of the things I don't even know about. How about that? I know I did that and I shouldn't have. And pray for your adversary and repeatedly and kindly, Matthew 5:44, for those that persecute you, mistreat you. So you start praying for that person. God, take care of them. May their dog have fleas. I hope their tire falls off in the end. No, you're asking God to bless them and forgive them. And consider sometimes there's reversals happen and really, Romans 8:28, God's working it all together for good. Said, you're focused on this result, I'm looking at that one. And tell yourself that. God knows better than I do. It's okay. Think about asking for that calm spirit and understanding heart. Let your requests be made known to God, Philippians chapter 4 and verse 6 and following. And the peace of God, which passes all understanding, keep your hearts and spirit. God, I'm going to turn this problem over to you. I do what I know to do and approach it in a humble attitude. Yeah, well, we're fixing you, Kurt Marcel, and I'm here. Whoa, Paul, what's your attitude? 1 Peter 5:5, clothe yourself with humility. I'm here to serve. How can I help? I think I've created a problem. What can we do to make it better? And when you do, seek that win-win solution, not I win, you lose, and every time. Ephesians 3 and in verse 20, he's able to do exceedingly abundantly beyond all we ask or think. God, make me better so we can make the situation better. And then finally, you leave the outcome with God. Beautiful passage in Romans chapter 12. As you come down toward verse 18, that he's looking at this and he talks to us about pursuing peace. I'll start in verse 17. He said, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. For it's written, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So, what should our attitude be? He said, here's really what it is. Then we look down in Romans chapter 12 and in verse 20. He said, but if your enemy is hungry, feed him. You bless them. If he's thirsty, you give him a drink, for in so doing, you'll heap burning coals on his head. Maybe he will change his mind. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. Well, we're saying, God, you've got the answer to everything. My biggest problem is me. And God, I want that to change. I want to be a blessing to others. And so as we look at that, think as we close in Philippians 4, 8, 9, if there's anything worthy of praise, let your mind dwell on these things. It's the positive. Yeah, but that Joe Pisano, man, what he does and this and that. What about the great things he does? That attitude of service and willing to do anything that he can, and preaching and raising babies and handling life and dogs and cars, and because we focus on something we didn't like and you miss all the things we do. And the God of peace shall be with you. You're here this morning, you say, I want to live that kind of life. Maybe you need the prayers of the saints. Maybe you haven't been baptized into Christ and you want that to be the overarching thing. When Jeff said, why are we here? Just immediately I said, what's the common denominator? It's Jesus Christ. That's why we love one another. That's why we love the Lord. That's why we have the lives we do. Because the God who lives in us. If you'd like to respond in any way, we're going to sing this song, number 707, To Christ Be Loyal and Be True. If you'd like to respond, let us know by coming forward. As we